Hi, I'm Jordan, and I've come to make an announcement. What's the deal with fighting games? You know, fighting games. A relatively smaller genre of games where two players compete head-to-head to see who's better or just mash a few buttons. This genre is known for its hype community, big fat personalities, scrub quotes, neutral-based footsies and zoning, and combo trials that take up so much of your time and energy that it leaves you a crooked old man waiting for your grandkids to show up. Completely forgetting that they died years ago. So, where do I stand on the genre? Well, you know what virginity smells like, what do you think? I love this genre, and the little communities around it. Even if sometimes parts of the community make me want to tear my hair out. I love Melty Blood, I love BlazBlue, I love Tekken, I love Guilty Gear, and I love the shit out of King of Fighters. But if there is one series that I cherish above others through thick and thin, it's Street Fighter. Street Fighter might not be the flashiest thing on the market. There are certainly more interesting and prettier games out there, and good God, are their series more consistent in quality. But hey, Street Fighter V is good now, water under the bridge and all that. Long story, I'll get to it later. However, no other fighting game franchise comes close to being as recognizable as Street Fighter. Here, let me check the IMDb listings real quick. Oh no. Never mind. What the fuck is a Rumble Roses? Go! Take me already! I don't want to live in this world anymore! Anyways, my story in fighting games starts with Mr. How Do You Do Ken in Ultra Street Fighter 4. I took one look at the game and its community and never looked back. And seeing as it's been nearly 3 years since that fateful August, I've decided to really do a deep dive into the history of Street Fighter, and cover not only the mainline titles, which includes hit titles such as Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 3, Street Fighter 4, and Street Fighter 2010, The Final Fight. But also some of the wacky spin-off titles the series has had over the years, and it all starts with the triumphant success of the first Street Fighter. If you consider triumphant as being better than Tongue of the Fat Man. I need to talk about that game at some point. Actually, no, don't. I'm not going to give myself ideas. Back in the August of 1987, a team of two by the names of Takashi Nishiyama and Hiroshi Matsumoto took a look at the fighting games at the time and said, hey, these games are dumb and stupid. We can do it, but better. Blam, an arcade cabinet with a stick and 6 buttons. What is this, a calculator? Now, instead of having a choice between punch or kick, you have punch and kick, and 3 strengths for each. Now, if this seems like too many buttons to you, might I recommend the Deluxe Cabinet. It's got 2 pressure-sensitive buttons, and how hard you hit them translates to the strength of the resulting attack. Surely, this is the true way to play fighting games, and every game after should also use this control scheme. On top of this, the game has motion inputs, where you hypothetically swing the stick in a direction and hit a button for a secret technique. For the era, it was a visual treat, with large sprites and detailed backgrounds. All of this is hypothetical, of course. The original Street Fighter blows, and it doesn't take long to see why. We first start by adding quarters to the machine and hitting start, and then selecting the country we started. And then we get a choice of, Ryu from the streets. Having one playable character total is one thing, but that's not the only thing that ruins this game. This game might have looked good for the 80s, but it's not winning any awards today. The backgrounds range from looks nice to birdie stage. The music is similarly bad. Most of the time, I love a good FM synth soundtrack, but this really does sound like the stereotypical robotic farts with the exception of maybe Birdie's theme. The gameplay does not function, and I mean that literally. Your jump is some weird triangle shit. I've been through Calculus 2 at this point, and this shit still doesn't make sense. How do you fuck up a jump this bad? There's no combos to speak of. If you try to make one, no matter how far your fist goes through their ass, it does not count. There's no knockdowns, and thus no Oki, and your normal moves are useless once you figure out how special moves work. Oh, by the way, how about those special moves? Yep, that looks fair. Yeah, the normals are completely outclassed by Hadoken and Shoryuken. Those two specials do so much damage and come out instantly. Even if you block, you still take a ton of chip damage, which isn't great for a fighting game. And we don't talk about Tatsu. It's not good. Just about the only thing I can say is remotely good is the bonus games. One is meh, but the board-breaking minigame is actually surprisingly serviceable, and I wouldn't mind it returning for future games. At the end of the day, they're just minigames. What really matters to a one-on-one fighter is versus gameplay, and this just isn't it. Anyways, after Street Fighter 1's the very grand success, Capcom looked back and said, "Hey, this game is dumb and stupid. We can do this, but better. Again." And thus the favorite child was born. Come February 6th, 1991, Street Fighter II would hit the arcades with an era-defining Super Nintendo port releasing soon after. When I say this is the fighting game, I mean it. When the words fighting and game come to people's heads, they think of this game and these characters. For the time, the game was a head-turner, and Capcom will never let you forget it. Why is this? Well, let's dig into the game. Street Fighter II was a giant step forward for the fighting game genre, introducing so many concepts and advancements for digital pugilists everywhere to borrow from, starting with an actual roster of characters. That's right, this game has 8 playable characters, which may not seem like a lot for the double-digit rosters of today, but compared to Street Fighter 1's cornucopia of character, it might as well be massive. This is the true birth of Street Fighter as a series. A one-on-one slugfest with a large roster of dynamic characters. Speaking of those characters, let's meet them, shall we? We have Ryu, the Japanese martial artist from the first game who returns with a major facelift in every way. He looks and plays much better than in Street Fighter 1. He's an all-round fighter and great for beginners with his easy motion inputs that are universal at this point. Also, he's reliably mid-tier in almost every game he's in. Ken, also returning from Street Fighter 1. See Ryu as they are essentially the same character in this game. Chun-Li, the first woman in a fighting game. Chun-Li is a Chinese martial artist who specializes in having a very solid neutral game, using fast, strong buttons to tag an opponent trying to poke you. Guile is an American soldier with a haircut you could land a plane on. He's a zoner who is very simple to pick up. Another good beginner's pick. Dulcim, another zoning type from India who has the longest normals in the game. As a practitioner of yoga, he can stretch his arms across the entire stage. He also has a fireball and the ability to breathe fire. You know, because yoga practitioners are known to do that thing from time to time. Blanca, a rushdown character. Acts and looks like an electric-type Pokemon. Has lightning and roly ball thing. Both are useful in being a complete brainlet. Brazilian Ken players rejoice. Zangief, a Russian wrestler and the grappler. He has a 360 command grab that is hard to learn for some, but essential for any would-be main to learn. He looks very stereotypically Russian. And finally, E Honda, a sumo wrestler from Japan. You'd think he'd be a grappler with his background, but no. He's another rushdown character with 100 hand slap and a headbutt that looks pretty funny if you ask me. This roster is very hit or miss to me. On one hand, it really does feel diverse, and almost all of these characters look very distinct. On the other hand, they're not all winners to me. Blanca and E Honda in particular are characters I can really only look at and say, yeah, they exist. I realize this is mainly a me thing, but honestly, are you guys gonna tell me that you remembered that Edmund Honda existed? The roster isn't the only part of the game that's been improved. The graphics and sound have received a facelift. Sound effects are crunchy and feel nice. The music is an actual soundtrack now, and while most of the songs don't do it for me because of how many times I've heard them, they're all banger tracks. backgrounds are solidly in the okay camp. Nothing here is mind-blowing, but it's all good enough to do the job. The character art is, well, still pretty ugly. Aside from that, the sprites look good. All of this is nice, but it's not the biggest improvement. The biggest improvement that Street Fighter 2 makes over Street Fighter 1 is that you can actually play the game! The gameplay is a giant improvement over Street Fighter 1. Honestly, after this, anything would be an improvement, but Street Fighter 2 was not content with being anything. The 6-button format returns with a vengeance, although the pressure-sensitive pads from the first game were nowhere to be found. God damn it! Special move inputs were made easier and more lenient, meaning you no longer had to mash buttons until Shoryuken came out. And the specials are much better balanced. Not only that, but there are more of them. They're much more like special moves are today, being niche tools for specific purposes rather than glorified cheat codes. Combos worked their way into the game through links and cancels, further expanding the depth of the game's combat. With all these improvements, you'd assume I'd enjoy the game, but here's the thing. I'm still not a fan of this. For all the credit I give Street Fighter 2, it's still not a good fighting game. For one, World Warrior lacks the ability to pick the same character, locking you out of mirror matches unless you're using Ryu and Ken. Some moves behave in strange ways that seem unintentional. For instance, if you use Ryu's Shoryuken on a grounded opponent, Ryu is actually minus as fuck on hit. This means that even if you land the DP, you are going to eat the fattest punish of your entire life. The balance of the game is all sorts of whack, and many characters have infinite combos in the form of re-disease, combos where you do a string of moves that stun the opponent and then repeat until dead. This is a better game than Street Fighter 1, but improvements still needed to be made. Capcom must have thought the same thing. So much so that they may have forgotten to stop doing it. There are so many re-releases of Street Fighter 2! And it all starts with Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, which made the 4 boss characters playable. Those being Balrog, also known as M. Bison, short for Mike Bison in Japan. This American boxer is once again a rushdown character that uses high-low mix-ups for lots of pressure. He wants money and Vega, known as Balrog in Japan. He's a Spanish claw boy that plays keep away without really having a projectile. Sagat, a Muay Thai master and the final boss of the first game. Sagat is Taiwanese and my personal favorite of the boss characters due to his backstory and how it's fleshed out in later games. He has 2 good fireballs, good anti-airs, and Tiger Knee, a motion so iconic that the FGC has a technique named after it. And last up is M. Bison. Known as Vega in Japan, he's the final boss of Street Fighter 2. I don't really care for him, and I wish he would stop showing up because he has all the personality of a glass of pilk. Gil is a more interesting character. Hell, Ripto is a more interesting character. If you like him, go off, I guess, but I don't. Champion Edition also touched up the portrait art and made it actually pretty alright. Next came Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which sped up the game and further balanced the cast. The added speed really took an alright game and made it actually pretty good. I can see why people enjoy Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Which is why, for the next revision, Capcom decided to put the fucking brakes on with Super Street Fighter 2. Why? So, Street Fighter 2 Turbo was universally praised at the time for its lightning-fast gameplay. The game also sold millions in arcade cabinets and home ports. So Capcom's first decision is, this game is doing well. Let's take away the thing that's making it do so well. On the bright side, at least Super made the shift to the much more capable CPS2 system in the arcades. The CPS2 was Capcom's almost market-dominating hardware at the time, and would later go on to power the Street Fighter Alpha series, X-Men Children of the Atom, the first few Versus games, Darkstalkers, Cyberbots, and Super Gem Fighter Minimix. Those last 2 aren't important, I just like them. Does the switch to stronger hardware benefit Street Fighter 2, though? It absolutely does. And it also doesn't. Let's talk about this shift, starting with the new characters. You have Cammy, a hard rushdown character that's a fan favorite for some inexplicable reasons. Really fast and really agile. Fei Long, a Chinese action movie star who developed his own martial art. Not Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is an entirely different person. A really solid neutral game player. He is the inventor of the Rekka move. T-Hawk, another grappler and a pretty cool one at that. He's a native Mexican practitioner of his tribe's martial art. He's also got a lot of nice neutral and anti-air options, so he's designed more around punishing his opponent's mistakes. And finally, DJ, a kickboxing, breakdancing, Jamaican musician. He's got a good fireball and lots of nice keep-out tools. All of them are charge moves though. Thanks to the more powerful hardware, the game gets a graphical overhaul. Characters get new sprites and new moves, the new stages pop, and the brand new characters have some animation that would not have been possible on CPS-1 hardware. The music also got an overhaul using the CPS-2's fancy new sample-based chip. And for the most part, it sounds fine. Some songs sound better on the new hardware, some sound worse. I feel like a good FM song is just punchier than anything sample-based hardware of the time was doing. Guile's theme in particular loses a lot of the punch it had in earlier versions. In terms of balance, new moves were added to characters, like Ryu's Red Fireball. Speaking of Ryu, they finally made Shoryuken knockdown, and Tatsu is much more useful as an ender here. Honda gets Butt Splash, other characters probably get some new stuff, I don't know, I don't play them. Point is, a lot of weird Street Fighter II jank was fixed here, and it feels a lot more polished for it. Really, the only thing I can fault Super Street Fighter II for is not being turbo enough. If only Capcom had decided to make another version of Street Fighter II Turbo.
No fucking way!
Super Street Fighter II Turbo is the answer to the collective complaint of, where did all the turbo go? It retains all the positive changes from Super Street Fighter II, further balances the cast, adds even more new moves for characters, including giving some characters completely new normals. The original Super variants of characters are still selectable through commands, and it really goes to showcase how much better the balance is in Super Turbo. A whole new mechanic is added in Super Combos. Bigger, flashier versions of special moves that do a grip of health when the bar at the bottom of the screen is filled. This game does all of that while taking the game back to the speed God intended. These changes would provide the beginning for the grassroots FGC, creating a prototype for competitive gaming that would soon be known as esports. In 1996, a bunch of Street Fighter players from across the US would start arguing about who the best Street Fighter player was. These arguments would grow until some idiots decided to do something about it. Battle by the Bay was one of the first major fighting game tournaments in the US, and it's centered around Super Turbo. This tournament would eventually evolve into the Evolution Champions Series, the largest fighting game tournament in the US, and most of the world. I've been sucking on Street Fighter 2's schlong for about 2 pages now. And I still don't like Super Turbo! I've spent a lot of time thinking about why I don't care for Street Fighter 2, even in its best form, and I think the best way I can put it is, Super Turbo is the vanilla ice cream of fighting games. Every other successful fighting game after Street Fighter 2 has some sort of gimmick setting it apart. Hell, even future Street Fighters has something that sets them apart from 2. Alpha has its custom combos and even quicker gameplay, EX pushes into 3D, 4 has FADC and Ultras, 5 has its variable systems, 3 has universal parry and the most satisfying gameplay in the entire series. Street Fighter 2's gimmick is being a fucking snooze fest. Stepping back from my bias, Street Fighter 2 is the core essence of fighting games, distilled into a single package. The concepts that Street Fighter 2 pioneered are the reason that all fighting games of today are allowed to exist. And for that, I will begrudgingly respect it. Though honestly, what did it do to attain God status? 'Cause I can't tell.